From the beginning, make it your practice to say to every harsh impression, "You are an impression, and not at all what you appear to be." Next, examine and test your impression by the rules that you possess, whether it's in your control or out of your control. At the crux of this is basically that awareness precedes control. If you can become aware of a negative or limiting thought pattern, then you have a much better chance at being able to come up with a coping strategy to deal with it and hopefully get to a more productive and healthy state of mind as a result. So this reminds me a lot of programming, and it's a lot like debugging in programming, right? So when you have a faulty piece of code, you don't quite understand why it's behaving the way it is. So you debug it. You put breakpoints in, you look at the memory at certain points in the program's runtime, and you figure out what's going wrong. And once you figured out what's going wrong, then you can eventually, hopefully, develop a solution to the problem. And that's basically what testing your impressions is about. It's about identifying a negative pattern of thought and figuring out a solution to that negative pattern of thought. I think it's quite important to identify where these things started, right? Because if you have a bad impression, that came from somewhere. It didn't just come out of nowhere. At some point or another, you learned that you weren't smart enough, or that you weren't good enough, or that you would never get anywhere, right? Something somewhere had told you that thing, and you need to sort of figure out where that started in order to actually get a good idea of how to move forward with that thought pattern. So in year 3, which is around, I think, the age of 7 or 6 in the UK, I remember very clearly I had a maths class. Now, something very important to note here, it's a very, very key part, and that is I do actually have a learning disability called dyspraxia, which can limit your ability to organize information in your head and take things in properly. You can get in a muddle pretty quick, and when it comes to things like mathematics, it's not good. It can very quickly lead you down very confusing rabbit holes that you don't understand, or applying what you've learned in the wrong way. And that's what happened to me in this class. And I remember my teacher was teaching me about tens and units. A very simple subject, but obviously for a 6-7-year-old, that's something new to them. So for me, it was new. I didn't quite understand it, and I remember I'd sat through the class but didn't understand what the teacher had taught me. And I remember at the end of what she'd taught, I'd asked her to explain it to me again because I didn't understand before I could complete my worksheet. And she told me that I wasn't listening and that I didn't work hard enough. And as a result, I got held back in class. That was really upsetting for me because I really didn't like getting in trouble. But that was quite a seismic shift in my perception of what I was capable of. Because there I had learned that I didn't try hard enough, that I didn't listen, and then from that I inferred that I wasn't smart. So then the problem with that then is that you sow a seed, right? That's a seed of an impression. That starts somewhere. And then, because your brain has learnt something like that, that thought pattern becomes progressively stronger when you have other experiences that back up that impression. And the more strong that impression gets, the more difficult it is to undo. Now, an example of this is when I was in year 4. So I was learning something else in mathematics. I can't quite remember what it was. I remember what ended up happening was that due to my dyspraxia, I found it quite difficult to do time management. So people with dyspraxia can often find it very difficult to manage their time, and also it's very difficult for people with dyspraxia to write things down. So handwriting can be very unneat. It can also be very slow, which was definitely the case for me. So the teacher told me to hurry up. I wasn't completing the worksheet in time. So I hurried up. I felt very under pressure at this point, so I tried to get through it as quickly as I could. And then I remember by the end of the lesson, she went through my worksheet and I'd gotten literally half of it wrong because I'd rushed. And obviously the problem is with dyspraxia as well, especially if you mix it with anxiety, which I was a fairly anxious child, it can make your dyspraxia even worse from the point of view where you get in even more of a muddle in your head with the subjects that you're trying to learn, because obviously dyspraxia kind of limits your ability to take information in properly in the first place. You add anxiety on top of that, that's going to make things significantly harder, and that's what happened. And then I remember my teacher telling me that I'd rushed it way too much and that I'd got most of it wrong, and then that I remember being really quite upsetting because she got quite annoyed at me for it. And again, that reinforced that thought pattern that I wasn't smart. That, as well as that, I also learned something new there as well. I kind of learned that it doesn't seem to matter how hard I try, I won't get anywhere with stuff, because clearly this is what's happened here, and that's what happened with my previous experience with maths. So I didn't have anything else to go by, and that's basically what happened with maths, you know. From there, I just became less and less confident, and I had more and more experiences that backed that up. But the problem with this thought pattern is that it didn't just affect mathematics either. It affected so many other areas of my life. Anything that I found difficult, my brain then related to my experiences in mathematics, because mathematics was something I found difficult, and it felt like something I couldn't overcome. So then any time I did something that was difficult, I felt that I was too stupid, or that I wasn't smart enough to actually get what I was trying to learn. And that was extremely detrimental for my goals in the future. You know, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a thought pattern that had fully taken control of me at that point. So, you know, throughout my teenage years, for instance, this really affected me very, very badly with my programming, because I felt like I wasn't smart enough to do it. But the problem was, I was actually extremely passionate about doing it. So I kept going. But the problem was, anytime I came across a concept I didn't quite understand, I got scared and I didn't approach it. I just tried to hit the surface level understanding of it, and I didn't really go any deeper. I never put those things into practice. And it took me years to figure out how to unravel this. And this didn't sort itself out for years. The only time that I actually ended up improving on this front was when I started again in programming. Basically, I had started with a course on a website called Codecademy, and I think it was the JavaScript Basics course. And I remember from there, I'd learned about object-oriented programming. That taught me a really valuable lesson, and I didn't quite realize it at the time. And that was that object-oriented programming, I remember, was one of the things that I felt was impossible for me to get. I thought, no, I'm too stupid. I can't do this. What happened there was that they taught it to me in a way that I understood. It clicked. It made sense. All of a sudden, I was thinking, oh yeah, you could use this in databases. You could use this for managing users. You could use this for all sorts of different things. And it clicked. Like, everything just made sense all of a sudden. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a very powerful lesson to learn, because that was something that I thought was impossible. Turns out it wasn't. I'd completely contradicted that thought pattern. And I didn't realize it, but that day, that thought pattern got significantly weakened by that lesson. And I think a good way of illustrating this is with mathematics, going full circle. So what happened was that I had my first contract to be a programmer at the age of 21. And although I did enjoy doing it, in my time at that workplace, I actually found that programming wasn't the career that I wanted. I didn't find it fulfilling enough. I wanted to make more of an impact on people. I wanted more, person-to-person contact. And I felt that programming really wasn't going to offer me the sort of fulfillment that I was looking for. And so from there, I decided that I wanted to go into medicine. Now, the problem with this for me at the time was that I didn't actually have any qualifications with maths or English. That wasn't a problem for me on the English front, because I've always been quite adept at English, so I wasn't actually that worried about doing my English exams. But I was very, very worried about maths. And the reason being is because obviously I had all of these really bad experiences with maths, and again, I'd fallen down the same trap that I had with programming with maths. I thought I was too stupid to get all the complicated concepts in there. I thought that it would be impossible for me to overcome the challenges that I had encountered previously in maths. And so, my maths wasn't like horrendous. I did have a very competent basic level of it. I could, for instance, I could calculate change from a purchase, or, I could do basic percentages and stuff like that. I had everything I needed for, just basic life skills, of course. But obviously doing medicine, I needed at least a B, and I wasn't anywhere close to that level in maths. And so from there, I was presented with a challenge. I had this goal, which was medicine. I knew I wanted to do it, and I knew at any cost that I would do anything to achieve that goal. But I was met at a bit of a crossroads here. I was too stupid to do maths. How am I going to progress past that? Can I progress past that? And that was the question. Can I progress past that? And again, testing your impressions. Is it in my control? Maybe, who knows? Let's have a look. And this is where things started to change. So I went on Khan Academy when I decided that I would do this, and I told myself that day, if we're going to get anywhere, then we need to practice, 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 practice every single day. So that's what I did. For 15 minutes a day initially, I started practicing just really basic low-level maths. I went all the way down to grade 1 maths because I needed to do what I did with programming. I needed to start again. I needed to identify where my sticking points were with mathematics, and that's what I did. I started off at grade 1, didn't have any problems, right up until grade 3, and that's where things started getting difficult. So by now I'd upped my time every day to about half an hour to an hour, because it's always best to start in small increments of time rather than large increments of time to build a solid habit. And so that's what I'd done, and at this point I was practicing, like I say, about half an hour to an hour a day, and I'd hit a problem with ratios. I couldn't understand them. They were just really, 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 really difficult for me. I kept going, I kept going, I kept going, but the more I failed, the more upset I got with myself, the more frustrated I got with maths as a subject, and the more I just wanted to run away. But there was a difference this time. I had this goal, this dream of medicine, and it was just sitting there in the background, and I knew if I walk away from maths, I walk away from medicine. And so, again, this was a real crossroads, but at the same time, I kept telling myself, but I can't do this, I can't do this, I'm not smart enough, I've got dyspraxia, there's no way I can overcome this. But I kept trying anyway, and, I remember getting really, really upset with myself over this week, but I kept going, kept getting it wrong, kept getting it wrong, kept getting it wrong. And it reminded me of this quote that I'd heard where, every time you get something wrong, you're just learning how not to do it the next time around. And that's basically what happened. So at the end of this week, I remember I saw a shift. So before I was getting like 60 to 70% of all those questions wrong. But then at the end of this week, something remarkable started happening. Like I'd noticed every single day, it began to make more sense. And every single day, the percentage of wrong questions I was getting was decreasing dramatically. Until eventually, by the next week, 100% of my questions were correct. I was able to answer them quickly, and I was able to understand the basic concept behind ratios. And this is where something really interesting happened with my self-perception. This felt impossible to overcome. Like I remember that week was really distressing for me because I was looking at my bad experiences with maths square in the face. Like I was just going at it again and again and again and again, trying my hardest to sort of combat these bad experiences that I'd had and trying to overcome this lack of understanding that I'd had in ratios at the time. And I kept going. And what eventually ended up happening was that, of course, I ended up understanding it. I learnt it. Just like that time when I'd learnt about object-oriented programming. But this time I was aware of what was happening. That's the difference. So what happened here was that I learnt that that impression that I had of myself was wrong. Maybe I'm not that stupid. Maybe I'm actually capable of doing this. Because, for all intents and purposes at the beginning of this week, I felt that it was impossible to do ratios. It was completely impossible. I didn't think I'd be able to understand that. And yet, here we are. I understand it. I can get all the questions right in a heartbeat. I'd completely shattered that perception, more or less. I mean, obviously, it was still going to stick around. I mean, it was, a behavior that had built itself up over the course of over 10 years, so it wasn't going to be unraveled quickly. Yeah, that was something that was going to take a very, very long time to understand and unwrap. And that's illustrated by how I struggled moving forward with maths, I remember I encountered another really bad sticking point. I can't quite remember what it was now. I think it was something to do with trigonometry. And again, I just didn't get it. And it just felt like no matter how hard I tried to understand it, I just couldn't get there. And again, I remember I thought, right, no, we know from last time that this probably isn't true, but my brain was already going at it, no, you're too stupid to do this, you won't understand this, it's not even worth it. But again, this time, I had proof that those impressions that I'd had of myself and of these sorts of situations were probably false. So I knew that if I'd just keep trying and, just keep asking questions, keep trying to understand it from every angle possible, then I'd likely overcome it eventually. And again, that's what ended up happening. It took me a little bit longer this time though. It took me 2 weeks. But by the end of this 2 weeks, again, I was consistently getting these questions right. Again and again and again and again. Got them all right in the end. And obviously after this had happened, it made that thought pattern significantly weaker because now I'd proven it wrong 3 times. Then I became really aware of how much I'd been holding myself back over the years. And the more I moved forward in maths, the more I was proving to myself how capable I was. I was building up a new behavior. I was building up a new thought pattern that actually, when something's difficult, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to do. It just means that you're struggling to understand it due to a shortcoming somewhere, and that you need to figure out where that is. And that's what I did, and I became very good at understanding where my confusion, lied with things, where and how it would work, how it would make me feel. And because I was able to identify the emotions that came up when I was confused or, frustrated with a subject, I was able to sort of develop, effective coping strategies for that. I'd feel really upset with myself, or I'd feel too stupid to encounter what I was going to do. And, my coping strategy for that was like, okay, take it slow. If we're getting overwhelmed, just break it down into small chunks in small periods of time and just keep going at it. Consistency is key. Ask questions, talk to people who know what they're talking about. And I remember even just last year, I was still struggling with a lot of insecurity surrounding it. But now, mathematics has gone to something that I used to really hate to something that I absolutely love now, which is crazy for me to say because I used to hate mathematics. And it's something I used to be terrible at. And yet now, I just last year, I got a grade A. And now, it affects every area of my life, this lesson that I've learned. Sure, that thought pattern that had been instilled in me as a child is definitely still there, and it definitely still holds me back. But the way it does hold me back is so much more subtle now, and it's so much less intrusive. Like, sure, when I encounter something new, especially like on the piano, for instance, there's something that I struggle with, and I think, oh God, this is where my shortcoming is. This is where I'm going to fall down and not get back up, But I keep going. And again, every time I keep going, I learn, again, that actually I'm more capable than I believe. And I think, again, that's another really valuable lesson to take away from these experiences, is that just because you feel a certain way about something doesn't necessarily mean it reflects reality. But nonetheless, it's also important to, allow space for those emotions to come through, but to persevere. So I think by far the most important lesson that I've taken away from all my experiences is that it's really important to, question your impressions and to be able to, learn whether or not they're in your control, and if they are, and even if they're not, what you can do about that. Because once you can do that, the power that it can have over your life is incredible. Like, you can do so much more if you can learn how to deal with these thought patterns. But I think there's a really important thing to note here too, is that this isn't about suppressing your emotions of inadequacy. It's not about, just throwing relentless positivity at it, because I really hate that. The problem is, you've learned something that makes you think that way, and you need to figure out a way how to contrast what you think about yourself. And, just thinking in a mindlessly positive way isn't necessarily going to help with that. It's just going to suppress those emotions, and they're going to come up somewhere else at some other point. For me, it's been really important to just sit beside of those emotions and be aware of them, while also being open-minded to the possibility that they might not actually reflect reality. And I think that's been the important lesson I've learned from all of this, and of course it's enabled me to do so much more with my life now as a result. So thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll be coming out with more content a little bit like this sometime soon, because this channel, I don't want it to be just about programming, because that's not what I'm about. I love programming, but at the same time there's so much more I want to talk about and make content for. So I'm hoping moving forward we will have some more content about Stoic philosophy, about my experiences with mental health, about about my learning experiences too, with piano, with Spanish. So yeah, stick around, like if you like the video, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and see you soon.